SSD seminar. It is my pleasure today to present the speaker. You all know him. Let me just say a few things about Justin before we start this presentation. Justin McKinley was a graduate student at Michigan State University, where he studies environmental economics and policy. And during his time at Michigan State, he was research assistant for the campus of for the Office of Campus Sustainability, and then he came to UPLB as an exchange student. And then when he was living in the Philippines, Justin first had the opportunity to work with one of the former IRRI staff, Dr. Dorf, and that's where he got the interest of staying more with IRRI. So I first met Justin on the football field, playing soccer, football. So by that time, we didn't know that we were going to be working together. And later, he developed this interest of coming to IRRI as intern. So he talked to Sam, and I happened to be the person to whom he was sent to. So when he entered my office, he didn't know, oh, you're the guy I play football with. So then we've been together for almost a year and a half now, and Justin has been working on me mainly on CISA project. The title of his presentation today is Guidance in Technology, an Assessment of Project Intervention and Promoted Technologies. So Justin will be presenting this topic, but again, he wants to take the opportunity to talk to you more about all the adventure he has been through, staying here in the Philippines, and then also at IRRI. So without further ado, I would like to invite Justin to come on stage and give his presentation. Justin is, so far he has set a record here, I think. He's probably the longest intern in SSD. So we're happy to get rid of him.
Thanks. Let's see. Anyway, yeah. Ballard asked me to help write some of this introduction, and I added one line that he seemed to have removed from the final that says, when I'm gone, he's going to cry himself to sleep every night. So, and then he's telling me he can't wait to get rid of me. I've been here long enough, so maybe he's right. But anyway, this is a two-part talk. So, as we mentioned earlier, always problems with this thing. So I'm going to do, my first 20 minutes is going to be on this study inside of the CISA project, and as well as this being a normal seminar talk, it's also my farewell after a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half. I'm finally going. Saturday I'm on an airplane and heading back to the US. So of course in that time I've had a lot of experiences here in the Philippines and with IRRI, so I'd also like to share some of that too. I'm not even doing this, this is going. Anyway, so part one of the CISA. I'm going to quickly go through, some of you may not be familiar with CISA itself, or conservation agriculture, selection bias issues, so I'll briefly touch on these, and then again briefly go through the methodology, show our results, and kind of give the conclusions that we took from the results. So introduction, CISA is the Cereal Systems Initiative for South Asia. It's a project of Bill and Melinda Gates mostly, USAID as well. And the goals of the project are to decrease hunger and malnutrition, increase food and income security for resource-poor farmers in South Asia, and they want to do this through deployment of new varieties, sustainable management practices, and technologies, and policies. So CISA itself is, involves a lot of CG centers. So IRRI is one of them, IFPRI in DC, ILRI in CIMMIT. So we have four separate CG systems from, or CG centers from 4 different continents. So it's a pretty big project, you can imagine. And the area itself for CISA encompasses India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And this particular study on cost and return is on Eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. And here's a lovely map from the GIS department. Thank you, Nell, if you're here. And, all right, so the other thing that we'll talk about, this study was at one point maybe going to be over multiple seasons, but we ended up sticking with just one. So there's 2 different seasons in the IGP in the north of India. So the first being the Kharif season, which is the wet season when they're growing rice. Second being the rabi season, which is their winter crop. They're growing wheat, and this is the season that we'll be discussing in this presentation. Wheat. But in total, there's the resource conserving technologies that CISA has been promoting are direct seeded rice in the Kharif season and zero tillage for the wheat season. And what that is, in its most basic form, direct seeded rice is just hand broadcasting. So it's a replacement for transplanting. Of course, it can be more advanced. You can use machines, you can use drum seeders, but in the most basic form, it can be just throwing it up. So direct seeded rice is an advantage because you reduce inputs in labor, in irrigation costs, and the cost of crop establishment, particularly in your nursery operations. You just remove that entirely from the equation. And so that's the benefits for that. So secondly, with zero tillage, the machines are using for the wheat season. It's replacing conventional tillage, which means going over the field several times, puddling it. Instead, we just throw that to the side and we directly plant. And the result of that is, again, reduced labor, also reduced diesel inputs because you're only going over the field once, and also you have improved soil quality in some situations because it keeps the organic material towards the surface where the next year's crop can actually use it instead of burying it below. You'll hear me talk too about intervention. You'll hear me say with and without intervention. So to describe that briefly, the intervention class is going to attend training sometimes. Also, they have access to technology. Every once in a while, they're receiving subsidies, but as the project goes on, that's fewer and fewer. And they follow the CISA-promoted technologies and practices. And then without intervention is a control group. But they also sometimes engage in resource-conserving technologies that the CISA project is promoting. So what we're trying to do with this study is investigate which factors make a farmer more cost efficient and have higher net returns. So we want to know if the farmers are doing better in the CISA project because they're using the technologies, or is it the guidance of the project itself? Is it having that contact with the extension officers that are involved with CISA and helping the farmers to understand, everything from agronomy to the technologies themselves? So to answer, we did it in two different ways. We had two separate groups. We did CISA beneficiaries, the with intervention group, versus the without intervention group, the control. And then from our control group, ones that have no contact with CISA, we broke them down even further. We had no contact with CISA, but have adopted the technology, versus those who don't have contact with CISA, but also don't adopt the technology. So two separate groups there. And we want to compare the results of these two groups to each other, and that will give us some insight to the question that we have. So the sampling procedure that we used was stratified random sampling. So it's like we have all these tomatoes, and we get to randomly select these tomatoes from the big wall. This is from Pahia's festival, by the way. But we had a little problem with CISA. We were given a list of farmers to choose from. So our big wall of tomatoes became a little bit smaller, and now we have only a handful that we get to choose from. So that instantly introduces this issue of selection bias. So first things first, we have to do something about the selection bias. And maybe you guys remember Rod. The last talk we gave, he kind of tore into us, and that's how we started down this path. So we learned something from our last talk, and hopefully this one's better, even though the remote seems to be doing whatever it wants. So PSM, propensity score matching. It's used when treatment cannot be randomized, like in a case where somebody gives you a list of farmers that you can choose from. And it matches on observable characteristics only, so you can kind of build some sort of profile about the farmer and then match one from the treatment to one from the control. The literature is not very clear on how to select what characteristics you use, but the only thing it really says is that it shouldn't be something that's affected by the program. For example, we shouldn't have net return as a characteristic that we use in determining the propensity score, because we think that CISA will improve net returns. So, how it works. I'll give you a simple example. Let's say I have a new vitamin that I'm making from rice, and I want to see how it works in increasing somebody's ability to lift weight. I want to see if it makes somebody stronger. So I have a treated volunteer, this nice gentleman. And with him, we have to pick from a control group. And we have this fella. He also doesn't want to take the vitamin, but he'd like to be part of the study. And then we had this fella, and I don't know what he's doing at the gym, but he's there anyway. So we had to choose between these two. And I think if we look at this guy and this guy and this guy, we can kind of all agree that these two are probably the better match in comparing our study. So that's what propensity score is doing, is it's taking observable characteristics, matching one person to the next, and then that's how you remove some of the bias from your study. So you do this using a probit estimation, and these are the characteristics that we used. No muscle mass for this one, only things like the caste they're in, the size of their farm, their occupation, their age, education attainment, things of that nature. So moving on to the methodology. And the first one is pretty simple, cost and return analysis. Gross returns minus paid out costs and imputed costs. So the subsidies are coming out here, and the imputed cost and also the cost of family labor is coming out there. Cost efficiency, a little bit more involved. So you're taking the natural log of the cost of production, and all this is coming back to a per hectare basis to keep it the same across each. And then X is a vector of input prices for each of the goods that you're applying, and also the yield. So it's the output in kilograms or tons divided by a hectare. And then we have V, which is unknown parameter. So it's independently and identically distributed, but it's also independent of U. And U is where we insert these characteristics that we think affect cost efficiency. This is where we say, well, I think it's going to be being part of the CISA project that's making inefficiency better, worse, and all these things. So those all come in at U. Propensity score matching. It's essentially all you're doing is you're predicting the probability that somebody would participate in your program. So that's the difference. So it's a probit estimation. You determine through the treatment and control which one is going to participate, which one have the closest likelihood of participating. And you can do a few things with it. You can match using a kernel matching system, or you can do nearest neighbor, 1-to-1 match, 10-to-1 match, or any number to 1 match. And then with or without replacement, meaning if it's with replacement, you can use the same farmer 5 times, as many times as you want. Without replacement, you use him once, you throw him away, he doesn't get used again. So what we did was nearest neighbor without replacement for our study. And going the wrong way. Okay, so the results of the study. First of all, this is just our socioeconomic characteristics, and I'm showing this so you can see the effect of the propensity score. By us actually matching, you'll probably notice that here are between the treated and untreated. This is untreated, and then this treated is after the propensity score. So you'll see our sample size has changed because we've done the 1-to-1 matching without replacement. So, slide's getting ahead of me. So what we get is, before we treat it, we have 3 characteristics that are significantly different between the without intervention and the with intervention group. And then after the propensity score treatment, we're able to correct for all of it. So no longer is there a significant difference in these characteristics between the farmers before the study. So this is first thing, propensity score matching. We do the same thing again with our adopters and our non-adopters. But this time you maybe will notice there's 4 columns, and the difference you see there is that there's a different sample size from 40 down to 32. And what happened is there's this notion of on support and off support. So what it's saying is that 8 of these are laying out here. 8 of the ZTV group, the adopters, are outside of this range where there's actually an overlap between our treatment and our control. So when there's an overlap, those are okay, but if they're outside of that range, then you just have to get rid of them. So we lost 8, which is unfortunate because our sample was already pretty small for this part. And again, you can see many significant different, many different variables are significant between the control and the treated group. This time we have 4 different ones. After the treatment, we've either reduced entirely, or we have one that's gone from 1% significance down to 10%. So not perfect, but
excuse me,
better.
Can you please explain first what do you mean by untreated and treated?
Yeah.
It's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I did it on the last slide, but untreated, this group is before the propensity score. This is before we do PSM. So untreated is before propensity score match it. The treatment is after, the treated is after we've treated it with propensity score. So we're first trying to adjust for selection bias, and that's what I'm discussing now, is this adjustment
So
for
it's not
selection bias.
exactly treated, but selection bias.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what
it's-
we cannot understand because untreated means you do something.
The proper terminology should be before PSM and after PSM. When you refer to treated, people think about technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's before PSM, and here's after PSM. So yeah, what I'm showing is the difference in the propensity score. Okay. So yes, all right. Moving on, and still it's the same when I inappropriately call it untreated and treated. It means the same thing. So it's before and after the propensity score has been used. You can see this is with CISA, non-CISA. So if you have CISA, you have a little bit higher yield. You have an edge on the yield. You're making a little bit more in your cereals. One of the bigger differences comes in here. Your paid out costs are about 5,000 rupees per hectare lower, and imputed costs also lower. And the thing that really matters is in the end, when it all comes back, what you end up with is, and I'm going to focus here because this is after the treatment. So we have 22,000 rupees per hectare versus 13,000 rupees per hectare. So the farmers that are using CISA are realizing net returns that are about 9,000 rupees per hectare more than those who are not using CISA, those who are just on their own. So we can look at this graphically, and this is kernel density of our CISA group and our control group. The CISA is in blue, and you can see net returns. They go up to the right, and you can see the CISA group is doing significantly better. The other thing that we did was cost efficiency. And again, it's the same group. CISA group is in blue. The control group is in red. And the remote's trying to rush me through stuff. So this we found CISA farmers to have a cost efficiency level of 1.64, which is to say that on average, the CISA farmers spent 1.64 times as much money for the same output as the most efficient farmer in our study. And the control farmers were 2.15, so they spent more than double the most efficient farmer for the same amount of output. So, and this is significant too, at 1% level of significance between these two groups, comparison of means. Moving on again for the ZT adopters versus non-adopters. You see here, we've lost some of the, sorry, it's doing whatever it wants. We've lost some of the significance that we had last time between the value of cereal, for example. So the yields are no longer significantly different between these two groups. And done. So maybe I'll just come back here and do it the old-fashioned way. All right, sorry about that. If you have any complaints, you can address them to Denner, because this is quicker. All right, so moving on. So now we have total paid out costs. There's also a pretty good difference, about 4,000 between our ZT group, our adopters versus our non-adopters. And imputed costs are also doing better in paid out costs in the adopting group versus the control group. And of course, like I said before, the important thing is the net returns. And in this case, you'll see we no longer have a significant difference of 1%, but now it's gone down to 5%. So what we see is inside of the adopters who aren't part of CISA, the difference isn't as evident. It's not as strong. We don't see as high of a return versus the control group in this case. So it says that CISA is meaning something. And here we have about the same distribution as before. We still have our, maybe it's not the clicker's fault. We still have the ZT weak group, the the treated group is still doing better in net returns, but you don't see, it's not as far to the right. There's not as much of a difference this time. And similarly, we have our cost efficiency. This time they're pretty close, 2.07 versus 2.16, and there's no significant difference between the two, so they're pretty much the same in terms of efficiency. So our conclusion, the CISA group, the farmers had higher net returns, significant at 1%, just to recap. They were more cost efficient at 1%. The ZTB adopters have higher net returns, significant at 5%, and they're slightly higher in cost efficiency, but it's not significant. So, So we think the CISA guidance may have a more substantial role than what the technology itself does, meaning the technology is only as useful as your understanding on how to use it. And that's what we're seeing in our numbers. The people involved in CISA, there's something different than actually the technology itself. And that's the guidance to us. All limitations will come up once. Okay, so limitations, we had undersampled our control group, and that should have been the one that we oversampled. So that limits the use of our propensity score trying to match a treated to a control. We were doing it the opposite way. We were matching a control to a treated. And it limits, it makes our ability to work outside of the CISA project much more difficult. So for us to replicate the study again, it would be nice to have a larger control group so we can end up with more than a sample size of 32 on the control and 32 on the treated. So that part we've corrected now. We've oversampled our control in the current study. And another limitation is that we're only correcting for observable characteristics with the PSM. With this project and any project like it, there's going to be a lot of self-selection bias in the farmers that actually want to participate, and that's where Green comes in. And the idea is that in our next study we'll be using Green, his methodology helps to adjust for self-selection bias as well as these observable biases after propensity score. And lastly, we had a short time series, so it limits the methodologies that we can actually apply. We just finished the 6th season. We're about to send interns to the field for a 7th season, and hopefully it'll continue and we can come up with a decent panel in the future. And now the fun part for me anyway. So all that stuff's over. I don't know what's going on with this machine, so maybe it doesn't matter if I use the clicker or not. Like I said, 1.5 years here is a long time. So before I talk about here, I want to talk about where I'm from, kind of to give you a better understanding. So I think most of you know I'm from the U.S. I'm from the United States. So here it is. That's my state, Michigan. Kay spent some time there, so he knows it well. And you may know the natives, the locals in Michigan, they lovingly refer to their state as the mitten because of its striking resemblance to the wintertime hand warmers. And here's a closer view. And you'll probably notice if you ever talk to anybody from Michigan, and David's not here to back me up, if you ever ask them where they're from, they always put their hand up. And I think now you'll maybe understand. So we always point. We point to where we're from. But I have technology, so I'll point with this red arrow. This is where I'm from. And here's my neighborhood. So, I'm from agriculture. And I have a lot of water too. This is the Fawn River, Round Lake, Honey Lake. This here is my grandparents' farm, and the house I grew up on is right here. This was taken the last time I was home, which is 1.5 years ago. And it's the terrible kind of winter where it's just really, really cold, and there's that much snow on the ground, so nothing to play with. So, this is a better view. Springtime. Springtime in Michigan, it's a little more fun when there's no snow. So this is a view from our front porch, my parents' house. It's a great time of year to be in Michigan because you just endured the long winter, and now everything's coming to life. So, maybe now you understand more where I'm from, and I didn't do it just for that. I also did it because I want you to understand that if you grow up in this environment, you're not so aware of what else is out there in the world. So it's really difficult because most of the people from my area, they're pretty hard pressed to, I mean, they've probably heard of the Philippines, but they'd be pretty hard pressed to ever find it on a map. So it was really difficult explaining to my friends and my family why I was moving to the Philippines to work for this organization that they've never ever heard of in their entire lives. And it was frustrating. My dad once, he said to me, I don't understand why you have to go to the Philippines. There's so much agriculture here. So I gave up. I just made a joke. Val said earlier that we knew each other from playing football. So I made this joke. People would ask me, you know, how'd you get this job in the Philippines? And I would say, well, I think they needed a defender for their football team. And I thought it was pretty funny. I was proud of myself. It was a good escape from the actual story. But it quit being funny when I found out that it might be true. So when I first arrived in the Philippines, Val was on travel in India like he frequently is. And my first official order as somebody who works for Val was this email. Just make sure you join the soccer team. Contact Val with So I quit telling the joke because I didn't want people to know the truth anymore. Anyway, so that covers this move. Now I'm here. And true to my contract and true to the reason for being here, we played a lot of soccer. But we did a little bit more too, I think. Here, I just want to, this was nice to kind of reflect on this last year and a half and think over stuff. And Val was happy too. I think it's hard to tell, but I think he's giving me a thumbs up for all the good work in the photo. But a year and a half, we redid the cost and return survey actually a couple times now. So it's a lot easier to get through. So the stuff that goes in is much nicer. So we don't have so much to fix on the way out. So that's been nice. In terms of publications, Val and I together, and a number of other people, Adam included, Bart Duff included. So we've had 3 conference posters that I've been involved in. I've been a co-author on 7 conference papers. I have 2 journal papers accepted, and 3 more that are under review right now. And today included, this will mark my 7th presentation since I've been here in IRRI. So 5 of them in the Philippines, 1 in Singapore, and 1 in Vietnam. And of course, it's appropriate. YU's here in the background. If anybody knows YU, you know that she loves going to conferences. So she was at both of these and also presenting. So actually, Singapore, she presented twice. So she's busy. She loves conferences. All right. So things I've learned from Val. I've learned how to stand in a really cool fashion in front of skyscrapers. But more importantly, he's given me an introduction to spatial analysis. He's taught me about agglomeration economies, and I've even used this to some extent with relative diversity index, and specialization index. I learned a lot with production functions, with cost efficiency, technical efficiency, propensity score matching, and even quintile regressions. So we have a paper when that was how I learned. Well, I don't know if Val really taught me. He just told me I had to learn on that one. Anyway, I think maybe the best learning experience came I guess it's been a couple months now. We went on this massive trip to India. So trains, planes, automobiles, and even tractors. We went everywhere in India. So north, south, east, west, no matter what, we made it there. And we learned that traveling in India can be kind of dangerous. So it was the closest to a plane accident I've ever been into in my entire life, and it was a little frightening. And I'm convinced to this day that the only reason nothing bad happened to us is because I was blessed by an elephant, and he protected us. I think a fair number of people in this room have been to India, considering that IRRI's so involved with it. But I think you all understand that it's I mean, I wouldn't call it a slow-moving place or a boring place, but it's certainly not developed. So in terms of development, this is Guwahati. This is what the sky looks like in the evening, and it can be somewhat shocking to be, at least development speaking, one of the most forgotten areas in the world. Especially when you come from Singapore 5 days earlier. And I don't know if it was by design to try to scare me or what, but I go from this skyline to Guwahati in 5 days. So somewhat of an adjustment, but again, where I come from isn't so developed either. So the development transition wasn't that big of a deal for me. The thing that stuck out more in my mind is that I'm from an agricultural system in the US, and now I'm going to this agricultural system in India, and I just see these massive differences in the two. Just one example is, if you look in the background, this is an irrigation pivot in the US, and this thing is probably 150, 200 meters long. And it's not even a big one. They get bigger. This is what the irrigation system in Bihar looks like. It's just a hose and a pump. So, pretty different. A lot of these irrigation systems in the US too, it's to the point now where you just call a number on your cell phone, it starts up on its own, you don't even go to the field anymore. So, things are changing. And I think the bigger difference is just the machines they use themselves, the equipment. So we have, I mean, this tractor is huge. It's pulling, this, by the looks of it, I think it's probably a 16-row corn planter. So it's a 4-wheel drive tractor, 275 horsepower. The inside has air conditioning, I'm sure, radio, probably CD player. There's actually a farmer in my neighborhood who even has a small TV inside of his tractor because his fields are so big. So he just watches the TV while he's going and turns around. And then we get to Bihar. And this is their tractor. It's a water buffalo. It has about 1 horsepower compared to the 275 that we see in use in the US. So, very different. And it's hard to apply the knowledge that I have of agriculture in the US to these sort of systems. But they do also have machines. And this is one of the machines that we got to see in use. This is a zero-tillage machine. It's one that's being promoted by CISA. And it was really nice to see it actually in motion, in work. And it was also good because some of the farms we got to see what we're trying to avoid by introducing these machines. They were under a drought when we were there in Tamil Nadu, and this dark spot is just a massive, massive crack. And it happens from frequent puddling. When you puddle and you puddle and you puddle, you have the soil so loose that when it dries it contracts, and then you have these big holes. So it's something that the use of zero tillage is going to combat, and you avoid some of the things like this. And also getting to talk with the farmers and understanding more the issues with, I think the biggest thing is labor scarcity. And I'm not the only one who's talking about it, I guess, because here it's on the board, NREGA, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act of India is causing a lot of trouble for the farmers because they'll offer more money for less work than what the farmers can, so that's why there's this big push to move away from labor and move into mechanization. More than that, you got to see the farmers, and you got to see that their troubles are real and they wear these troubles on their face. Just look into their eyes and you understand that life's not easy for a farmer in India. It's really different. And it doesn't matter if you're from the north or the south, you have the same troubles. And it's not just that though. I mean, you see hope, you see these other better faces too. You see this pride to have an international research institute visiting your plot. This guy was so happy to have us around. So there's positives, and it's positive too to see that the technology's working. Some areas better than others, I'll say that much. But the adoption in the south is really great. This farmer, for example, he has 11 acres. His whole farm is 11 acres. About 2 of it was in maize when we were there. The whole other 9 acres was planted to rice using the ZT machine. And he's never used ZT before. His first time he plants his entire farm using this machine. So he's trusting, I guess. But by far the highlight of the whole trip is if you go to Bhubaneswar, you get to see the trees that Bob Ziegler and Sam Mohanty planted when they visited. And they're not so watered. No, that's a big lie. That's not the highlight of the trip at all. The highlight of the trip, of course, is the people, like it usually is. So Ganesh was absolutely incredible. Val mentioned that I was interested in temples when we got to the airport, and we went straight from the airport to a temple before we went back to the hotel. Going around was great at working with the locals and showing us around. What I realized when I was building this presentation is that we didn't do very many interesting things with Rahman because I don't have a single photo of him and I spent the most time with Rahman in the EUP. But it's not, in his defense, it's not a terribly exciting area. Anurag taking us to the field, showing us some delicious food. Prasoon, this one here. Prasoon for fighting for us everywhere we went. We had some troubles at the airport, and Prasoon tried to get us on a new flight. And I learned a lot about Indian culture because he goes in fist pumping and just screaming and yelling, and he comes out and he's like, no, nothing. So he said to me, you go in, you fight. If you can't win, you stop. So I learned that. And also this random kid who, when Prasoon failed to get us on an earlier flight, kept me company because she wanted to watch the documentary I was watching. So, I guess it was the friend. I don't know how to explain that interaction. She just came out of nowhere. She was pretty friendly. Anyway, this is my reflection. So my personal experiences, and they weren't all work. So I have to continue on. And I'm using this picture as a total cliche. To say, climb to new heights, I can't do it without the help of others. This is rock climbing, my friend Jonas on the other end of the rope keeping me alive, and it's important when you're climbing. So, it's true, I did some of these things in my time here, things I'd never done before. I picked up a new hobby, probably the most expensive hobby I have, but well worth it. It's absolutely incredible. I love being underwater. And also the hardest thing that I did in my whole time here was the Astrid Cultural Night. And I wouldn't have done it if Andy wouldn't have signed us up and pushed for it. I don't consider myself a musician, and I sang and played guitar in front of 200 people, something like that. It was absolutely nerve-wracking. And the other hard thing about being here in general is just that it's really hard to be away from your family for so long. So I'm thankful for people who step up when your family's gone, like my new Uncle Frank, who invited me over to his place for Thanksgiving. And of course, Adam, who took over to be a family member over Christmas when we went to Thailand together and enjoyed it. And this looks really nice and peaceful, right, everybody? It's good, right? Here's Adam, about 2 hours after getting the first stitches of his entire life. And there he is a couple hours earlier. And if any of you have heard that I'm bad luck to travel with, this is where it started. Right here. And of course, I mean, I have a really big family here. It's not just Uncle Frank and Adam, but it really makes a difference to have a strong group of friends. And I couldn't have asked for any better friends the whole time I was here. It's really been a fantastic group, and I'm going to miss everybody so much when I'm gone. Which happens soon. So, I already got you. All right, so what now for me? Well, the flight's going back, so I'm back to Michigan now on Saturday. And like I said, it's really difficult to leave. The Philippines has become a massive part of my life. Before I was here with IRRI, I was here as a student. I've been here for more than 2 years, and it's a long time. So it's hard to adjust. The one thing that I have going for me is this morning I had this picture from my sister. These are my 3 nephews doing a human body countdown. So that's number 4, because I'll be home in 4 days. So I'm excited to see what number 3 will look like tomorrow. and yeah, so I get about 3 weeks at home with my family and friends that I haven't seen in so long. And then I have another trip. I'll be headed to Arkansas. From Arkansas, I go to Belgium and Germany. And the next 2 years of my life are planned again, which is kind of uncomfortable in some way. But at the end, it's worth it, I think. So I'll have a master's degree in Ag-Econ from University of Arkansas, and a second one in rural development from either Humboldt University or Ghent University in Belgium. So I think this about wraps it up. And of course, I'm very, very excited about what I've done and where I'm going. And I know, I'm fully aware that I wouldn't be able to do it without all of you. So I appreciate any sort of support that I've had from anybody in this room, my SSD family, Thank you so much. Maraming salamat po. And please keep in touch. This will be my new email in the top right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Justin, for this interesting presentation. I would suggest we go straight to the question about the paper. Anybody would like to ask questions on that first? Dr. Casilio?
What did you learn about the Philippines?
Well, I learned that I don't agree with all of the cuisine, but I do like some of it. Even to the point of balut, I'm okay. But gabawang, I will never be able to eat. And bagawang, the shrimp paste, never in my life. Never. Shrimp paste is absolutely terrible. But more than that, I've had a really unique experience in the Philippines. I've done some pretty fantastic work, not just with IRRI, but with Bart Duff in Palawan. The stuff that we worked on there it's growing legs and it's taking off. So I've had these really unique encounters with the people, and I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I've met so many people in this country that are just absolutely amazing to me. And there's of course sometimes. So I'm thinking of my time in Palawan. I worked with a guy named Jerry Ortega when I was there. Jerry Ortega, fantastic guy. He was wonderful, great for Palawan. We worked with him with community development, community-based ecotourism. So we developed a trekking trail. It's starting to get funding. It's doing really well. So Jerry's like selfless, absolutely selfless. One of the best guys I've ever met in my entire life. And then you'll have the opposite side, where there's some desperation in this country and people will take advantage of it. Jerry was murdered because of his political views, because he was opposed to former Governor Reyes, he was opposed to mining in Palawan, and Governor Reyes hired a gunman to kill Jerry. So, yeah, very unique experiences. So I know that people like Jerry exist, and I know that people like Governor Reyes exist. But I think that in all my travels around Asia, I'm always anxious to come back to the Philippines because I know the people here as a whole are just absolutely fantastic and have really made me feel welcome the whole time I've been here. I've learned a lot about fish. I don't know, we could go on a long time with this question.
Okay, more questions?
I think I have one question about PSM. I want to hold you for too long because maybe that will be should be left for a while actually. For a question about PSM, that I think your the sample size is really small. So do you plan, or maybe do you plan to expand, increase your sample size? That's one. And the second question is, do you see any difference before you have the PSM treatment in terms of the cost and returns between treatment and the control group? Yeah, and that's some of my comments on Justin. I saw your accomplishments and I'm very jealous. I think I should know IRRI earlier, so maybe before I went for my PhD, so I come here and have about 7 papers published, things like that. So I'm very glad for you, and I hope that you have all the luck with your MS programs and and have a more interesting experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless you're itching, Val, I think I can handle this. Okay. So that was part of the limitation because it was sort of, it was an idea that came out. We didn't really sample with this idea in mind. It's after we had the results back we sort of came up with it. And we've adjusted for it at this point. So we've adjusted in a couple of ways. Number one, the sample sizes have grown altogether. The last season we had close to 700 in our total sample to choose from. And what we did is we were taking ideally 120 intervention farmers, CISA beneficiaries, and then 160 non-beneficiaries. So then we can work inside of the non-beneficiaries a little better. But with this idea in mind, well, it didn't quite go as planned because the last season in the northern part, they didn't have any adopters in their control group, which is still kind of a mystery and a little frustrating because we don't get to replicate this study. But hopefully in the following season, when they're doing wheat again, the ZT wheat has been adopted more in Bihar and EUP. So hopefully we can see that we can visit this again with a higher sample, because especially when we go back to just the control group, the adopters and the non-adopters with no CISA intervention, that's where it got really small.
Okay, just to add on a little bit on this one, since 2009, when I joined here, one of my responsibilities within CISA was to provide feedback to the staff about how those technologies are performing on the ground. So when we started this, we started with very small sample. Then I mentioned to Sam, if we really want to provide some recommendation about the performance, this sample size has to be much higher than that to be quite representative of the population of the group that we are working with. So we started increasing the sample size in different areas in India, and we have this group that Justin was calling earlier, the beneficiaries, and the one that the control group. And we increase them up to a level. I do this survey twice a year, in the rice season and then in the wheat season. That makes me go there quite often. We were not comparing those, it happened to be that even those who are not receiving any intervention from the technologies, they're picking up also, they start adopting the technologies. So Justin and I have this idea that, it could well be that, okay, we probably need to look to compare does the guidance of CISA project actually has any big effect. That's where we got the idea of comparing the without intervention and compare them on the use of the technologies or not. We hope that in the coming season, we have already adjusted for that small sample size, because we realized that we were sampling the beneficiaries too much. We are oversampling them. So we adjusted that in the coming season. So we have a big enough sample now to come up with something more statistically significant. And one other thing is that when you look at the way we introduce technologies pretty much around here, it is the strategy that most of the time the technology is first given to the progressive farmers, and then we expect that they will spill over to all the other farmers. But when we economists, we started dealing with those data, we talk about issues of selection bias. Why don't you randomly select from the area and give them the technologies? But the danger in doing that is, when you select anybody, your technology may fail. So you might target the right person to give it to them, so that later on it will pick up, right? That's what we face this challenge, and that's where the idea of using PSM makes more sense. Yeah. So usually we don't have any possibility to change the delivery strategy. People just go on and start giving away with the technologies. If we were supposed to advise them, it could be like, okay, randomly choose among the population and give them the technology. And later on, when we start analyzing those data, that will help us better. But it doesn't work this way. It always goes through the progressive, the one who are willing to take the risks at the beginning. And then we hope that other farmers, especially the smaller ones, will learn from them.
Thank you, Ban. Actually, just wondering, are there negative effects of the zero tillage technology?
Negative effects? Yeah, I think so. One question that I had for the hub managers when I was there was how they're going to deal with compaction, because if you do ZT for too long, you never have any tilling, and then it's going to be more difficult because the ground will continuously get harder every time that something goes over it. You have more of a problem with weed control, because you have to spray more herbicides in a lot of cases, or you're kind of losing the advantage that you gain from not transplanting by hiring more people to weed. So you have more people coming in and hand weeding, so your costs are sort of offset. So weed management is really the biggest complaint with everybody. And compaction is something that hasn't actually been thought of too much at this point, but I think it's going to take a couple more years before it's really a problem in the fields.
Paano naman na zero tillage? based on your results, would you recommend another CISA for the zero tillage unit? Honestly.
Well, I think some people who've worked in CISA just cringed a little bit when they heard it because there's been some politics inside of it. But I think the technologies are good. I think that what they're doing is good. But one concern that I have is that it's all based on the largest. I mean, there's a lot of advantage, but the largest thing is that it's based on this Narega-induced labor scarcity. So if the government policy changes, then a lot of this incentive for the farmers to switch over and actually start using the technology goes away. So I think that it's at a risk. At this point, yeah, it's helpful. It's helpful economically. It's helpful environmentally. But at some point, if it goes back to where you can have cheap labor, it'll still have some environmental benefits, but the farmers won't care as much if it's cheaper to go back to the old way. So I think it's positive, but I think it's at a risk. That helps.
Just a follow-up question. That's why I asked the question actually, Justin, because if we go back to your tables and the cost and returns, the herbicide cost for weed intervention was much lower than non-intervention side. So probably it's good to look at further the data that you have.
Well, I think because we had some. Was it in CISA versus non-CISA?
The CISA, in the intervention group, recall that Justin mentioned subsidies at the beginning. The home managers in most of the CISA area, they're giving subsidies in terms of herbicide, seed, and all those things. So it could well be that they don't receive the whole quantity that they need for the entire farm, but just a portion. So that saves them on how much they need to buy in addition. But we did account for the subsidy. We took the subsidy out. Yeah, they receive subsidy in terms of herbicide, in terms of seed, and so forth. So that might be one of the reasons why the level of the cost of the herbicide is smaller.
Yeah, absolutely.
There, the herbicide cost.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think Val just summed it up really nicely. The herbicides herbicides and seeds are the two biggest CISA inputs.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
for subsidies. So a lot of the cost is absorbed also in the material subsidies for our with intervention farmers, and also we have farmers that are using the technology outside, and they have the same problems as the farmers who get CISA intervention, maybe get the subsidy, but they don't have the guidance. They don't have. They may not necessarily be using the right amount or the right kind of herbicide on their field, so you could see an increase in their usage. So the ones that are using the technology but don't have guidance from CISA, they could be using too much herbicide. But the biggest thing really is just that CISA gives herbicides as a subsidy, so the cost isn't
That's
captured.
right. That's correct. That's not your affiliate. That's right.
it's written for wheat.
This is wheat.
Is that for this?
This one's wheat.
So the subsidy was not incorporated because it is paid out.
Yes.
With it, the price is still the cost of the subsidy is still in the model. It's in these imputed costs. But we'd have to break it down again if we wanted to look at the actual outputs of each one that goes in here. But yeah, my suspicion is they're not, because this is paid out. Those were paid out costs, right? So so that's the difference between paid out and imputed. So the subsidies are included in imputed. Paid out would be what we see here.
Any other question? Yeah, go on.
I would like just to ask the labor, because labor, the difference of the prices in labor is only around 500 rupees, as well as the machine wise that without intervention is higher machine rents compared to the grid intervention.
You're speaking to labor?
Labor and machines.
Yeah.
Is that rent, machine rents?
Machine. Yeah, this is total cost, so it depends. This is paid out cost for machines.
Yeah.
So it's usually rents, yes.
Yeah, let me add on
One is the for wheat or for rice?
for wheat season. Yeah. For donut, the way the CISA hub in India operating is they provide the machine to the farmers to use. So they go to the village and they give a machine to one farmer who can actually provide services to the other one. So they actually charge much less, just to create the incentive for them to adopt the technology. So all this come into play now. So what we want to see in the future, once the project pulls out, and they now have to pay the right amount, how all these results will now look. So this will come. So this season, I'm now doing it for the 6th time now. So we'll see in the future how things are changing. So every time when I do this analysis, I send it back to the home manager and let them know what is happening with their promoting technologies. Thelma, do you have one also? No question? CISA. Anybody else involved in CISA here? Okay. Any questions?
So just confirmation. So the subsidy.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I just want to point out that the 0 days per week is now being adopted, but not the 0 till progress.
In Bihar and UP. In Tamil Nadu, we saw a very different scene where people are adopting much more quickly.
About just confirmation. So the much of the benefit comes from the reduction of the cost, but not the increase of the revenue, right? In this,
Yeah, it's mostly
Yeah.
reduced
the
output.
cost.
Or
And the
reduced costs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
reduction of the cost. Part of the reason is due to the subsidy, or that is controlled in this
We
table.
control from the subsidy. We took it out.
Yeah, but how about the machine? That machine is provided at the lower rate.
Yeah, machine is provided at the lower
That
rate.
one is
Yeah.
also
so if,
adjusted?
if they have to pay for the machine at the market rate, that could be something else. So this is something to look at in the future. Yeah.
So the machine cost is subsidized rate,
As
not
subsidized rate.
adjusted.
Yeah, as a subsidized rate. Yeah. So the idea is later on, the private sector will take on, and they need to find out about the demand and for those machines in all this area, and they're going to start supplying to the farmers. And I guess at that time it will be at the market price. So we can see how all this change.
So this net return still reflect partly new technology and partly the subsidy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. More questions?
Was CISA happy with your results?
Excuse me.
Was CISA happy with your results?
You help with it?
CISA happy with the result?
Okay. That's a very good question. Yeah, let me give you a background about this. The very first year, 2009, when we organized the first cost and return survey, I remember it was Joyce that was taking care of this survey. And Joyce did a very good job setting up the survey, the questionnaire, and everything. Then we sent out, I'm doing this using local students from university over there, recruit them, and send them to the field, train them, and then they collect the data and send it over here. So the very first year, the result that the student gave us showed that the farmers who are not receiving intervention are doing much better than those who are receiving intervention. So we all went to the first home manager meeting in Dhaka. And then I said, Sam, I don't think I can present this result. Why don't you go ahead and show it? Because they might kill me. And this is what happened. When Sam presented that result, it was just like throwing a stone into the river. And since that day, we have been battling with the people. There are people who don't actually want to see that survey going on anymore. But I'm still persistent. I'm doing it. I'm doing it every time. There are people who don't want to hear about it because somebody called me and told me, you sent in wrong signal to the donor. Why are you showing this result? Then I said, no. See me? Thelma can add more. Yeah. But I was able to do it with the support of Sam, Thelma as well, and many other people. And at the last meeting when we visited India, people were actually very happy. And this survey is one of the things that is working very well in the project. And that was because I persisted. The first one did not discourage me. I keep doing it. Justin has helped me quite a lot. I put a lot of serious into it so that people don't just see that it's something that is done without any serious. That was a good question. Anything else? Should we close this and let Justin go now? Okay. Thank you very much, Justin. On behalf of SSB family, I would like to thank you for this gift. And there will be some snack downstairs, I think. Okay. Good. Thank you Dr. Garcia. That was really I hope you learn what you're doing inside. Okay, go ahead.
Just 10 minutes ago, I'm very interested.
What?